Managing dietary restrictions can be one of the hardest parts for anybody who's planning meals for groups. And I wanted to share with you a few ways that you can use Wholesum to help make that a little bit easier. So there's a few topics that I was hoping to cover today. First is how to edit the dietary restrictions list that you can use in Wholesum. Second is how you flag specific recipes as containing those dietary restrictions or allergens. And then finally, a few different ways that you can plan your meal plans to avoid possible dietary restriction conflicts. So to start with, I'm going to share my screen quickly and show you how to adjust the list of dietary restrictions that you might use. So I'm going to go up to my settings here. If I scroll down, you'll see this dietary restrictions section. This allows me to edit the list of dietary restrictions that are in my account. If there are any that you need to remove, you can remove them, you can relabel them, or you can add additional ones. When you start your account, it will come preloaded with the most common dietary restrictions that you'll find out there, but you can modify them from there if you'd like to. So that's the first pretty straightforward step. The second step is flagging recipes as containing those ingredients. So I'm going to go to my list of recipes here, let's say bagels and cream cheese, and I'm going to scroll down here to an area that says meal contains, and this is a place where I can indicate that this is a list of dietary restrictions that I just showed you, and in this case we're going to say it has wheat and gluten, and I'm going to save that. So those are ways that you can manage your recipes. You can go through each one and flag which dietary restrictions are included in each recipe, so that we can avoid them in the future. The next thing I'd like to talk about is how we can use Wholesum to plan our meal plans around those dietary restrictions. And in general, I think of there as being three different ways that we can do that. So the first way is to eliminate those recipes that have the dietary restrictions in them. So we're just going to look, it's a sort of a lowest common denominator approach, where if there's somebody who has an allergy or dietary restriction in the group, the whole group is going to avoid that dietary restriction. The whole group will be gluten-free or vegetarian or something like that. The second approach is to serve those individuals that have dietary restrictions different meals, completely different meals. So instead of pasta and meat sauce, they're going to have a gluten-free or a vegetarian dish on the side. And then the third approach is the most common approach and the most powerful approach, and that is to substitute ingredients. So instead of saying, these people are going to have a completely separate meal, we can say everyone is eating pasta today, and instead of regular pasta, we're going to also bring some gluten-free pasta that we cook to substitute that single ingredient in there. So I want to quickly walk through each one of those different approaches so that you can figure out which tool works best for you. So again, the first one was to avoid those recipes completely. So if we want to do that, I'm going to go to my meal plans quickly, and let me share my screen. And if I'm creating a meal plan here, on my left, what I can see are the recipes that I have to choose from. If I'm trying to avoid, for example, any recipe that has gluten in it, I can use this does not contain filter and say, let's just show the recipes that don't have wheat or gluten in them. And by adding that, the remaining list here is a list that is going to be wheat or gluten free. This is not always a crowd pleaser approach, because it often can be so limiting that the rest of the group doesn't have a lot of options to work with. Those individuals without dietary restrictions might not be too pleased with this approach, but it can be really helpful if, for example, we want to filter out tree nuts. And we just remove tree nuts, and now if there's someone in the group that has a really severe allergy, we can just avoid that completely so that we're not worried about it and choose from a more limited option. So that can be a really great tool in that situation. So the second option now is what we call meal replacement, right? So that's where we're serving one meal for most of the group, and then for those individuals that have a dietary restriction, we're going to serve a completely separate meal. The example of that I'm using here is this dinner. So maybe the whole group is eating spaghetti and meatballs, but in the event that somebody is vegetarian or gluten-free, we're just going to cook some rice and beans for those individuals. And I've added both of them to the meal plan here. And what we want to do is scroll down to the bottom and decide how many people are eating the spaghetti and meatballs. In this case, we'll say 12, and how many people are eating the rice and beans, and we'll say 3. And this way, we're really serving 2 different, completely separate dinners in order to avoid those dietary restrictions. And some people will eat the rice and beans, and others will eat the spaghetti and meatballs. If you choose to make completely separate vegetarian versions of the same meal, this is another way to manage that, where you would add the vegetarian version of the meal and then indicate how many people are eating it. So that can be a really great tool as well. And the final tool that I want to talk about is substitution ingredients. So first, I'm going to go to my settings, and I want to make sure that the substitute ingredients toggle is turned on. It should be on by default when you start your account, but you can always come here and check and make sure that it's on. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to go back to my recipes quickly and open up this bagels and cream cheese recipe. And what we'll see when this is on is that there's now a substitution column. And this is going to allow me to create rules as it relates to dietary restrictions. So in the case of bagels, I'm going to click here on the substitute, and I've said for bagels in this recipe, if somebody has a wheat or gluten allergy, I'm going to replace 15 whole bagels with 15 whole gluten-free bagels. Now, it's not going to replace it for the entire group. It's just going to replace it for those individuals that have a gluten or wheat intolerance. But you want to build this out as if you're replacing it for the entire recipe. And in the next step, I'll show you how that actually flows into the meal plans. Similarly, for cream cheese, if I check off dairy here, and maybe I can say we're going to replace 1 tub of cream cheese with 1 jar of peanut butter. Great. And now I will click save on that. And what we'll see now is if I go to create a new meal plan, and we'll use this example here, as I slide this up, we're going to be substituting more gluten-free bagels in place of those wheat bagels. And similarly, if I slide up this dairy one, we will be substituting the cream cheese and we'll bring slightly more peanut butter, so that when I save it, open the PDF quickly, we'll see those gluten-free bagels on the shopping list. And we will also see, if I scroll down, that within the meal itself, you'll see that we're substituting 7 gluten-free bagels and 2 bagels here. So that's how we should be able to see the substitution. So for 9 individuals, that's how this will look. So those are the 3 main ways in which you can manage dietary restrictions for your groups. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and